Talking about splashes, let's go and do wading techniques now. What actually is wading? It's the car's ability to go through water. Well, how deep can it go? Well, that's dependent on the vehicle in the range that you're looking at. This is a series Land Rover. Probably around here somewhere is an optimum depth to go on without doing too much preparation to it. By a rule of thumb though, I would always recommend that somewhere between the centre of the wheel and the top of the wheel rim is a fairly safe depth, apart from anything like the Freelander, which actually has an air intake a little bit lower. The engine bay. Now, this is a petrol engine. As some of you are aware, petrol engines are very susceptible to water. We've got a coil, we've got HT leads, we've got a distributor, we've got alternators, lots of electrical components in here. If they start to get water on them, they can start to cause a misfire. A misfire is the last thing that you want when you're going through water. So how can you cure that, or how can you stop it? Well, you can liberally coat the old engine bay. Well, not the whole engine bay, probably just the electrical part, the leads, the distributor, the coil, in WD-40. You can put an old blanket, a car mat, anything over the front of this grille to stop water going through the radiator and being sprayed by the fan all over the engine. In the middle of a lake, that's the last thing you want. In a river crossing, you don't want it misfiring. You need all the torque and the power you've got. Now, this is the air cleaner. Very, very crucial part of the engine. This is where the engine actually breathes from. If we actually went over the depth of that and sucked water in, we're in deep trouble. We actually what they call hydraulic the engine. It comes to a stop. What's hydraulic locking? Imagine that you were in the swimming pool and you come up after being underwater and you took a gulp of air and somebody pushed you under. You choke on that water. That's exactly what the engine does. It chokes, but sometimes it can't choke enough and it stops the engine. Does very, very serious damage. So please, 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 identify where that is on your engine. It's in various places. It's on the wings, on either side of the wings. On the Freelander, it's down below. So check before you go wading. What else can we check? Well, where the engine joins the gearbox, there's actually a hole in the bottom of this thing called a bell housing. Now, why is there a hole at the bottom there? Because where the engine joins the gearbox, it has to be joined by something that's shaped like a bell, which is why it's called the bell housing. Now, at the back of the engine and the front of the gearbox, there are oil seals. If they leak, they don't actually allow oil to get into that bell housing. Well, unfortunately, the clutch is in there. If there was no way of that oil to get out, it would gradually fill up by the time you kept topping the engine up. The oil then would get and contaminate the clutch. When the clutch is contaminated, it's had it. It will slip. But the problem is that where the oil can come out of that hole, water can also get in. So you can actually buy a special little plug, bolt, whatever you want to call it, and it actually seals that hole up. Okay, that's the petrol engine. How about this one, the diesel engine? This is not too bad. It's actually a lot better engine to go wading with. It's not susceptible to water. In fact, overall, the diesel engine, as opposed to the petrol engine, is probably the slightly better engine. Now, I know some of you may argue with me against that, but we prefer it here at ProTrax. It's a lot better torquey. It's a little bit more reliable sometimes as well, especially what we put it through. But as I said, less susceptible to water. It's got high pressure pipes here instead of HT leads. It may help though still to put a blanket over the front because it stops water going through. It stops it getting onto the electrics of the alternator, the little bits and bobs down here that just make certain electrical components work on the engine. Again, we've got an air filter on this side. It's just here. It sucks in through the wing. This one's got a snorkel on it which helps it a little bit. Please remember though, this is just a brief description. Just research it a little bit more thoroughly before you actually start doing deep wading techniques. We're going to show you shallow wading to start with. So this is shallow wading with a Discovery. So why have we just done all that preparation to our engines? Well, let's show you. Let's put a Discovery through this short water section. But first of all, how deep is it? Well, that's the next procedure. And this is when we're training people, they always say, how deep's the water? And that's what you have got to find out. The driver or the co-driver has now got to get out of the vehicle and test it. So let's get somebody else to do that, shall we? Ed and Tristan, can you come please? As you can see, they approach, but they're not driving straight into the water. That would be a very, very foolhardy thing to do. Just because there's a set of wheel tracks in and out, you don't know what made those wheel tracks. So Tristan's going to have to come in now, and he's going to have to wade through the water. Now, some people come up and just have a little stamp around. You've got to walk through that water. He's walking centrally, as you can see. He's having a good prod around. Because although the water may be 6 inches, 7 inches deep, how do you know how soft it is in there? It could actually sink in about a foot, which would be fatal having your car midstream bellied out. So here he comes, look. He's treading very, very gingerly now as he gets very carefully into the deeper water. But there's no obstacles. You can see his feet, he's spreading his feet out. There's no rocks, so we've got no problems with actually fouling the underneath of the car. We're not going to hit the diff, we're not going to take the spoiler off. Once he's happy, he's going to turn around, he's going to give Ed the thumbs up, and Ed's going to come in. What sort of speed is Ed going to do? There's 2 wrong ways and a right way to do this. We're going to get Ed to do the wrong way first. Okay, Ed, if you can just do it slowly first, please. So what Ed's doing now, he's actually coming into the water very, very slowly. This is not the way to do it, because unfortunately he's pushing no water away from him. It's building up in the door, seals, going in. And stop, please, Ed. Okay, you can reverse out of that one. The problem is with coming slowly like that, is you've got no momentum. If the car actually does start to sink into the mud and the suction starts to track it back, you need to be able to accelerate. You could probably accelerate in first gear, but it's instant revs, the wheel spin, and you're stuck. But the unfortunate thing is as well is that if the water was any deeper than that, water would be coming up in the engine bay. It would be hitting the pulleys, it would be sprayed all over the engines. Now let's get him to do it faster. Okay, Ed, let's do it faster. Whoa, Ed. Let's try that again now, a little bit better. Now, it's amazing how much water you actually push in front of you. Now, that looked very, very dramatic, didn't it? But the problem is that without that blanket on the front, can you imagine the amount of water that got rammed through that radiator, got sprayed all over the engine. Not the best thing to do, not by a long shot. Now let's try and do it properly. So what we're going to do now, we're going to come in very, very gently, second gear, accelerating as we go. Here he comes. Okay, Ed, let's try that. So you can see, second gear, and he's pushing. And he's pushing the water in front of him. He's in fact making a bow wave. That's the best way to tackle water. Now people say, is there a set speed? There isn't really. We've used the Discovery that time because with its spoiler low down, it actually pushes more water in front of it. You could have a 110 with big wheels on it. You need a lot more water, a greater depth of water. So realistically, what you've got to do, you've got to sit there, you've got to look out your window, you've got to see that bow wave, and you've got to keep attacking it. You've got to push it with you. Now, that's shallow wading. Let's see what you can do with a well-prepared vehicle. Now let's try and demonstrate and show you what to do if the water gets that little bit deeper. Ray, if you can just help me now, please. Now, on a Defender, there's a few extra things you ought to think about. A snorkel. And what it does, it raises the car's breathing ability. It actually sucks in from just there now, not from just here. What Ray's actually doing over there is that intake, similar to this one here, is actually the air intake for the fans inside the car. Well, in a moment, Ed's going to be going fairly deep water, and it will come up over the bonnet. And one of the places it falls into is the air intake for your fans inside the car. Now that is directed via like a little bathtub effect into the heater box. Too much water in there can actually overload the heater fans. They can't turn, so they blow a fuse. Or, worst possible case, they will actually burn out the motor. The next thing is this just here. It's actually an additional air intake for your car, as some of you know. But of course, if the water's going to go over the bonnet, where's it going to go? Straight in there. Nice cooling effect for the legs on a hot day. So Ed, if you could shut that, please. And once again, you would have to walk this water. You've got to wade it, you've got to check it, exactly as we've just shown you before. Now, however, if this was actually a fast-flowing river, never ever try and cross it at right angles. the force of water hitting a 110 or a 90 or even a Discovery sideways on could actually displace the car. It could knock it straight off the road, and then you've got a major problem. Okay, Ed's going to demonstrate actually how to do this now. High and low gears, or a high and low gear box. What actually is it? Well, if you own a family car, you've actually only got a high box. You've only got 4 or 5 gears. Four-wheel drive vehicles like the Land Rover have 2 gearboxes, the high and the low gearbox. Well, a third gearbox if you count the transfer gearbox. Let's concentrate on the high and the low box though. The 5 gears that you normally drive in are actually in the high box. They're predominantly for road use. For terrain like this, where it's not too rough, it's not too boggy, there's not too much resistance. However, when you actually start to go off-road, over hills, down through mud and everything, you need a little bit more control over the vehicle. You need to alter the torque input to the car a little bit. So actually stop and you put the vehicle into low box. It lowers the overall gear ratio to the car by 2.5 times. Let's just try and show you visually. What we're going to do here now is Amanda's in the 110. She's in high gearbox. Tristan is in low gearbox. They're going to set off at a roughly 900 to 1,000 revs. They're going to set off in a straight line. You'll see straight away that Amanda will actually start to take the lead. But Tristan's got a little surprise in store for Amanda. Okay, guys and gals.